What happens when Bigfoot investigators actually have Bigfoot show up? Well, lots of vocalizations from both the humans and the Bigfoot. Tonight on the Squatchers Lounge podcast, we travel to Lower Washington State to examine some well-known and some unknown vocals from that part of the country. A brand new Quasi theory and camping tips for stupids, along with the news of the week and an Eldorado Bigfoot Watch update. Now it's going to be a fantastic show tonight. And here's the host with the most rockin' beard and Bigfooting, the Reverend Jeff Kelly.
Why, thank you, Reno the announcer, man. We very much appreciate your intros these days. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Season 6, Voices in the Night. That's right, we were talking about Washington State, Lower Washington State mostly, and we're going to get into some, what could very well be some of the clearest Bigfoot vocals ever recorded out there. I've done a bunch of enhancements. I've cut some segments up. We've got this and that and everything else as usual. But just to make you wait a little longer, we always start out with the news of the week. So let's see what was out there this week. That's right. Scientists discover oldest human fossil outside of Africa. Say what? Yeah. Apparently, the USA Today published this. Scientists have discovered the earliest modern human fossil ever found outside of Africa. An upper jawbone with several teeth was found at a site in the Misdia Cave in Israel. The jawbone is estimated to be 175 to 200,000 years old. The age was based on 3 separate independent dating methods, because one method just never does. The jaw belonged to a young adult of unknown gender. The findings suggested that modern humans left the continent at least 50,000 years earlier than had previously been thought. Well, we don't have any idea when anybody moved anywhere without a complete fossil picture, and that we will never, ever have. So stop trying to act like you have it figured out and just say, hey, look, new info. Yeah, that's the way that usually goes. All right. The CamoNews.com tells us that lawmakers want to make Bigfoot a state symbol, and they want it pictured on the license plates. That's right. Olympia, Washington. Imagine that. Isn't that what we're talking about tonight? Sasquatch may or may not be roaming through the woods of Washington State right now, but a bill is trying to make Bigfoot one of the state symbols. State Senator Ann Rivers wants Bigfoot to be named our state cryptid, which is an animal that hasn't been proven to exist. Whether you're a believer or not, Washington has the highest number of Bigfoot sightings in the country, and Senator Rivers said that passing the bill would be a way to recognize Sasquatch contributions to the state and preserve Bigfoot's legacy. I think our state senators could probably have a little bit better things to do with their time than this. Oh, wait, that's my government shill stepping in. By the way, I haven't received my government shill check this week. So somebody from the government needs to get on that, okay? I need my deposit, or I won't continue to hold back what I know about Bigfoot. Pardon me, I'm still getting over this friggin' flu. Tallahassee Democrat posted this one up. Filmmaker works Bigfoot angle. Oh, shut up. To win a commercial contest. Yeah, Stacy Brown Jr. posted back last year about a clearest, biggest part of Bigfoot picture ever on a social media account, and attached the image of course, a blurry silhouette of nothing that you really couldn't tell. Touting him as the 2016 Bigfooter of the year. Not really sure who determined all of that. I think that was Facebook Find Bigfoot maybe at that time. Who knows? He later explained on it that his intention was only to create hype for his new project, a Bigfoot-themed commercial for the Kia Drives Creative Video Contest. Apparently, he received over 4,000 plays on Facebook alone with his crap and won. Hey, well, good for you. You tried to act like you had something you didn't have, and you pulled the wool over a bunch of people's eyes, and then you made a fake Bigfoot commercial for a Kia. So congratulations. I guess you're a filmmaker now. I made a film like 4 years ago, but okay. Congratulations there, Stacey Brown. See, it's not all negative. Oh, speaking of negative, God bless it. Yeah, we talked about this, but apparently it's a bigger thing than what we wanted to actually talk about. Todd Standing has basically now come out in public and said that his videos are 100% proof that Bigfoot does exist, and that now he feels as though he is being ignored by the government on purpose, as because he does have the goods on Bigfoot. So, you know, I ain't even going to continue with that flying crap. This was a really neat one. A call into the TV show or the radio show Coast to Coast. I was talking about strange howls in the Sierras. He said he was never a pro Bigfooter or against Bigfoot, but because he knew nothing about it. But 2 years ago, I had a remote cabin at 4,000 foot in the Sierras. I stepped out of my cabin one night about 9 o'clock. It was 2 years ago in January, 9 o'clock at night. And I'm out there looking at the stars, and a holler came out my way from my neighbor's cabin about 200 feet, just up the side of the Sweet Hills from the slate slope above me. Now, we talked about this one before when we talked about the Eldorado Bigfoot Watch that's going on this year. I've actually located on a map where these cabins actually are. Heading out there on Friday to meet with the rangers at the ranger station and go check out basically all the campgrounds in the area, just in case for something that goes wrong. If we weren't able to take the large group campsite for some reason, we'll be able to take a BLM site not far from there, and everybody will still be able to drive in by cars. Bad thing is there might not be any vault crappers, but the ones that are at the dam are right there. So we will find out on Friday for sure what's going on with that. But the neat thing was finding the actual cabins on the satellite maps of where these two particular cabins were, and they do exist, which a lot of times with coast to coast call-ins actually don't. All right, it's time for that. Hey, it's time to get your merch out. Redbubble.com/people/Bigfoot Watch, all one word, puts you right into our merchandise store. You can get the Squatchers Lounge podcast t-shirts. Go for the unisex t-shirt or the classic t-shirt. They're like $20. They're a whole lot cheaper than that premium stuff. I can't do anything with how they're offered. All I can do is make the designs and upload them to put them on offer in this particular venue. So biggest thing selling right now is the coffee mug. The coffee mug, I ordered 2 of them myself because, damn it, I'm going to have my own podcast cup right here on my desk to be able to drink from during the podcast. But, $16 for a custom printed podcast cup. I don't really think you can go wrong. There is also the Eldorado Bigfoot Watch, May 18th, 19th, and 20th, Expedition Stumpy. Sorry. The Expedition Stumpy shirts will only be available up until the time that the event has come. And once the event has come, those will be limited editions because that particular design will not be available again, as well as the official member 2018 Eldorado Bigfoot Watch is out there as well. So for anybody interested, it's redbubble.com/people/Bigfoot Watch. I'll put a link in the YouTube comments after the show. And that is how the news is done right here on the podcast. Yeah, I know. They still haven't fixed the Hangout toolbox. I guess the developer's on vacation or just doesn't care. Yeah, whatever the case. Yeah, we'll get along without it. And with that, it's actually time then we get in after the news. We get a little Quasi with things. So why don't we do that? Let me get my Quasi picture up here because I just found it while I was running my trap. And of course, didn't have it loaded like I should. Oh, you'd want professionalism after all these years, right? You'd think? Yeah, well, it's still an amateur show, people. All right, here we go. We got a brand new Quasi theory coming your way from the greatest Quasi man I know, Mr. Dean Cooper. And now, Quasi theories from a Quasi scientist with your host, Dean Cooper.
Plato does solid. Okay, so we all know there are 5 Platonic solids. The tetrahedron, the hexahedron, known as the cubed you squares out there, the octahedron, the dodecahedron, and the icosahedron. They have 4 faces, 6 faces, 8 faces, 12 faces, and 20 faces, respectively. We also know that 3 of them have the same flat polygons for faces. And we all know, of course, that the shape is the equilateral triangle. We need not explain what an equilateral triangle is because we all know it. The other 2 Platonic solids, the hexahedron and the dodecahedron, have for each of its faces and the pentagon for each of its faces, again, respectively. Now, as we all know, Plato didn't come up with these solids on his own. Some other Greeks talked about them before Plato fixated on them, most notably Pythagoras and Plato's Prothetus. Plato wrote most of his ideas about solids in his dialogue Timaeus, which we have all read and therefore know well. I'm sure you all thought, as I did, that he just went on and on and on about his precious solids until poor Timmy Timaeus damn near fell asleep. I know I nearly did. I perked up a lot, though. Socrates and the gang at Plato's Academy started equating each of the solids with one of the elements. The real elements: earth, water, fire, and air. Not those fancy schmancy ones we have these days. Earth was associated with the cube, air with the octahedron, water with the icosahedron, and fire with the tetrahedron. Now, if you've been counting, that's only 4 elements and 4 solids. Where did the dodecahedron scoot off to? What was its element? Plato only said the god used it for arranging the constellations of the whole heaven. That would require a whole other quasi-theory to explain. A bunch of them, really. We all know, though, that the dodecahedron is the ether. That's what most of the other ancient Greek philosophers thought. The ether is the first element from which the other 4 evolve. Why would Plato say the god used ether to taste the stars in the sky? Well, we all know that the Sanskrit word for ether is akasha, and that akasha, in the form of chitakasha, the ether of the mind, is the mind of God wherein all of everything exists. God thinks, and the thought appears in the ether, later to be manifested successively in and through the lower elements. But we all knew that. You may read the text of this on my blog at bydean.com. That's BHAIDIN.com.
Well, there you have it. Plato does us a solid. Yeah, we all know what the name of those hydrons are because, well, we all played Dungeons and Dragons. 20-sided die, 8-sided die, 6, whatever the hell they were. Actually, I got to be honest with you. Never in my life have I ever sat down and played a game of Dungeons and Dragons. Never. Sat down and rolled a character once and just never found the time to do a damn thing about it. But I did find the time to do a damn thing about this. And this, my friends, is this week's brand new camping tips for stupids from the Gone Camping channel. So let's take a listen.
Camping tips for stupids. Tip number 58. Camping. To go out into the wild heathen world and live amongst the sinners and bond with nature, all the cute, cuddly little animals. And sometimes eat them. And sometimes get eaten by them. Once in a while, I'll see some city-slicking liberal camping out in their RV, or hard-shelled camper or trailer. with their satellite TV, radio, and a damn internet. And these sons of bitches call that camping. Well, I call that safety space. Real camping is about feeling alive, fighting bears, chopping wood, ripping the guts out of the fish you catch with your bare hands, and fighting more bears. Just give me a sleeping bag, a big knife, and something to keep the damn rain and mosquitoes off of me, and I'm fine. I don't want to check Facebook every 6 minutes. I don't want to stay indoors and binge watch Netflix. And I sure as hell don't want to stand there and pipe my own damn shit out of a vehicle. If I ever have to deal with my own shit, it'll be only once. And it's to make damn sure I ain't got nothing seriously wrong with me. This has been Camping Tips for Stupids. Remember to spay and neuter your idiot population.
Well, there you have it. Camping Tips for Stupids. Sorry, it's not me. It is definitely YouTube's audio is just gone to crap. Crappity crap, the biggest crap storm in crap storm history. You can go to the Gone Camping channel here and catch the Camping Tips for Stupids live directly off of that channel if the audio broadcast wasn't so fantastic. We're just having a bad day here at the Squatchers Lounge podcast, but we're going to fight through it because it's important. That's right. So that brings us up to Bigfoot House. Yeah, that's right. New screams. There's things that we've never heard of before. Now, this one here, this one was brought out. Now, this is a very older call. Back in the 70s, there were several sightings in a gravel pit in Puyallup, Washington. Puyallup. Yeah, do your best impression of however that sounds. They were purported Sasquatch sounds, and they were recorded by a Mr. Marlon A's. You can actually hear bird songs and a train whistle in the background of it. But I've enhanced it up to a point that you can actually hear something screaming in the background. So let's take a listen to that one. Now you definitely can hear the where the heck did it just go? Sometimes we get lost in the things that we do and it makes us angry, but it's okay. There we are. That's what I wanted to kind of show you, was the kind of terrain in the area that these types of calls came out of. Now, the Chehalis Reservation is what we'll be talking about here in a little while later. But as usual, you can see that we're working with areas, the peaks, the sun, the usual types of locations that these types of calls and interactions come from. Is exactly what we're dealing with here again. We talked about that all last season. This season, we're talking about stuff that makes yelps and yells. Now let's take a listen to that one again. It's that powerful yelp that just is. We're having a hard time placing where those types of yelp calls are coming from. We've heard them in different places, and now here they are in Washington again. Now this next one comes from Snohomish, Washington, and that's where Philip Breakdown comes from. These are 1978 to 79, recorded by LW, is all it says. They were on their porch nightly. Their little dog, as the screams came from the gravel pit near their house, she recorded sounds for a total of 9 months. But in this particular case, this is one particular instance of it. The snow mission, it's definitely a whale. Now, those calls are, in different locations, years apart. Yet, sound very similar to each other. And that's one of the things that we're looking for, are things that add up together to make a bigger picture. The next clip, now this is a set of whistles that comes out of that same Snohomish area. I don't know what this is. I'm not saying that it's a Sasquatch, but I'm not saying I can recognize the type of animal that's making these whistles. And it's one of those cases where it's the area that why the wild woman, the Sonoqua, is depicted in the Native American art with her with her lips pursed, like she's whistling at something. The masks always point like that. And that, the whistles kind of go along with that legend. Are those whistles, are those high-pitched screams? I'm not really sure, but they're definitely powerful. Now, this next case was brought into some people who were out investigating in the Lake Ellen, Washington area. Now, we'll get that to come up here for us. Now, in this particular case, these people didn't hear any of the recorded sounds that came out later. They were captured on a digital recorder the last night that they were there. Never heard any of them at the camp. Some of the best recordings that they had gotten, but he just doesn't understand. Well, he understands that, these are just things that are caught on audio and they didn't hear them in camp, yet here they were. Now, the very first one that I caught on it was the howls near the very beginning of it. I enhanced them up so that you can hear it. Of course, that always brings the background noise forward. One of these has a huge croaking frog in it. So please, if you're listening on expensive speakers, turn them down, put on your headphones. Don't blow up your stereo listening to these Bigfoot noises. So let's take a listen to the first one. Was a couple of howls, and they start right at the very beginning. So listen close. you could hear the sounds of the howls echoing down across the water. So you know they had to be off in the distance, and the frog had to be right there, and yet the howls were still powerful enough to be heard over top of that horny ass frog. I mean, just like a lot of other howls that we've heard out there, that sounds very, very familiar as a Bigfoot howl. Now, the next thing that they picked up that I found was impressive on it was this wood knock. I've never really been been one to stand behind a wood knock, because I've always felt as though you should be able to go out and find where, you know, the babes, you know, squared up against a tree and took a stick strong enough to not destroy itself when he whacked that tree. You should be able to find those marks were in that tree where he hit it, and yet nobody ever has. However, listening to something like this and looking at it in the spectrogram, you know, to see how the sound waves actually move, there is no doubt that something stepped up and smacked something hard and wooden against something big and wooden. Now, when you look at those sound patterns in the program, when you're working with it, literally everything's just kind of mushy, wishy, mushy, wishy, 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 and then loud, flat sound waves come from that wood knock, and that wood knock is obviously much closer to their recorder than the people's voices that we can now hear since the enhancement in the distance. Now, again, this audio is from 2012. I mean, so we're only talking about a few years ago. The last thing that I picked up from this particular set of sounds that came out of this video was literal wood drumming. Now, we've talked to Jim Sherman a few times, and you know, we've had him on the show. Some of the audio that we had on that show, I believe one of them he brought where something was drumming on a steel or a plastic barrel, you know, that they had caught on a remote recorder at some time. But this is just very, very odd to me. I mean, I could just see a chimpanzee with a stick in his hand just banging it along a trunk, you know, just being a dick, tap, 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 until something got in his way, and you can hear that the stick just kind of stops. I mean, that's definitely not a woodpecker. That's a lot of things that's not. But honestly, I'm just kind of at a real loss for what that is. It's one of those cases where you'd have to find the area that the knocking was happening in and investigate the actual disturbances around where it came from to see what kind of an animal would have been there actually doing it. You know, I just can't picture in my head as a biologist what kind of animal would be making that loud of a knocking sound on the trunk of a tree continuously like that. It's just one of those cases where it's just very strange to me. So let's go back and take a look at that Chehalis Reservation where we were just talking about, where we were just looking at before. We came up to the Lake Helen. Now, this was the location that David and I, my old co-host, went, and we went and investigated at the Browns. Is what and that's the thermal picture on tonight's show ad also comes from that same location that year, which is why we went down there to investigate it. While we were there, there was a lot of hiking going on. There was a lot of investigation going on. There was a lot of claims going on. But it's definitely Bigfooty territory, and it is on the Chehalis Reservation, which pretty much anything goes type of thing. The reservation people kind of live on their own. Now, for privacy's sakes, I'm not going to show you exactly where these people were, but believe me, they're out there pretty much alone with a couple of neighbors that were out there. We were out there for 2 nights and ended up going back on the 3rd night. And there were 2 very interesting pieces of audio that we caught while we were out there. Now, the first one is that whoop, and I play it on the show to compare it to other things, but now you know exactly the area where this was actually caught from. Now, while I was laying in my hammock, which I do a lot because I investigate a lot by listening to the audio going on around me, I actually heard that from the area of the river that you can see on the map there. So, I mean, it was a logical place for it to be coming from. And there was no reason to think that that's anything outside of some kind of a primate making a whoop sound. And it's weird that, a lot of times those dogs precede a whoop or a howl, as if maybe the dog is hearing something before the human ear could pick it up. And that very well be possible. But the other thing that we caught on the 2nd night that we were there, again, now our recorders were further away from the fire pit because we had quite a few investigators there. I mean, there was 12 or 13 of us there. And we were doing something odd outside of what usually happens on that location. We were actually camping in the Bigfoot area, which nobody ever did. And so we were kind of causing a disturbance. And the 2nd night, while I'm laying, not feeling well at all, everybody hears this howl go off. Everybody went silent. I mean, there were conversations going on around the fire pit. I was 10 feet away in my hammock. That sound goes off and everything goes silent. So here we have it, another place, another set of 3 distinct types of howls. We have the wails, we have the whoops, and then we have the straight up howls that come out of these areas. And we've been to Ohio, now we've been to Texas, now we're up in Washington. And what we're noticing is the same types of sounds are associated with Bigfoot in a large geographical area of the United States. And I just think that as we go along this season with Voices of the Night, we're going to find that those are the sounds of Bigfoot. And we're trying to prove that case by the end of the season, hoping that a lot of people will be able to go out into the field and know what coyotes sound like, but also know what coyotes don't sound like. And I think that's going to be a far more important lesson about what we're learning here. We can kind of trim all the other stuff out, but let's take a look at who is hanging out live with us tonight before we get into our real Bigfoot encounter for the evening. Whole bunches of people out here tonight, so let's say hello to all of them. Miss Cheryl Willen is in the house. How are you doing tonight? Glad you're with us. Mr. James the Grower, official Eldorado Bigfoot member, as well as Gin. Hi. Long live and prosper. Let's see here. Starshine, she's out there swinging her tool around, as well as Miss Natalie Smith. Hello there. And Michael Bird is in the house. He's early on the night, as well as the Brown Dwarf. Didn't want to miss it this week. Glad you're with us, man. Raymond Lopez, how you doing, sir? Glad you're with us as well. Crusader Kid, yes, sir. Glad you lived in Washington. What'd you think of it so far? Mr. Forrest Cop checking in from northern New Mexico. Hello, sir. Hi, my name is Forrest Cop. People like to call me Forrest Cop. That's not really Forrest Cop. That's what he does, not who he is. Ha. Danny from Texas. How you doing there, Chief? Glad you are along for the ride as well. There is Mr. Collier Wilmus Reno, the announcer man. That's right. Don't forget Dixon Holes with Reverend Cole on Sunday night. We answer every question you ever wanted to know, honestly. Rubble. Are you stealing hamburgers again? I don't know. Oreo Cream Rocks. She's home. Welcome home. Mr. Rod Dupree. He's always in the place to be. Well, hello right back at you, Mr. Jonathan Dowdy. Glad you could join us. Dun. There is the Can Squanch. Hi, Can Squanch. Obsidian Radio is checking in as well as Mr. Dean Cooper. Don Rife. Hello, sir. Hey, I'm thinking about coming up there to that Irish Fest. I saw that link that you sent. I'm definitely considering taking a ride up there to Red Bluff. That might be interesting. Zoggy, right back at you. Xander Hansen. Yeah, how you doing? Let's see. Kurt Harris. He's in playing third base this week. Duty James was Oh, I know there's more than this. I have to keep going. There's far more than this. Donald Fuller. Hey, man. Glad you're back with us. It has been a while. I'm here. You're there. Makes everything groovy. And we are seeing hello, Mr. Timothy McCune. Glad you're back. Yeah, I know. I don't know what's wrong with YouTube sound tonight. It's just all glitchy. Jay Gerd is in the house. How you doing there, sir? Hot diggity dog. What you do to me? I don't know, but it's going to be painful in the end, I'll bet. Sam Squanch Rivera finally gets in the house. How you doing there, sir? Keith Harden. How you duty, sir? Let's see. They're getting down towards the end here. If you hadn't said hi, I ain't going to say hi to you because I don't know you're here. Yeah, I'm sure Sam Squanch is out there. Hello, as well as Squatch Box and Mr. Christopher. Eat your vegetables. They're good for you, I promise. I'll tell you why when you're 21. Sasquatch Omega. I think that's the first one. Hello. Right back at you. Doug Hudson. Holy crap. Getting your squatch on with Washington calls tonight. Hey, Doug was there when we caught those calls. He absolutely knows what went on out there. Definitely wasn't any of us out there in the field screaming at the recorder. That's for sure. Grassman 58. Glad you are back with us as well. Wow. There's a lot of people hanging out live tonight. So y'all thought I was going to say hi to you, but I didn't forget. I didn't forget at all. And what I didn't also forget was another real Bigfoot encounter to finish this monster up with tonight. And that is where we are going. So I want to thank each and every one of you for being here tonight and enjoy this real Bigfoot encounter replay. It's going to be an interesting one. There'll be an after hangout afterwards. If you guys are interested, I'll post a link. And as usual, may the Squatch be with you.
This is Real Bigfoot Encounters with Reverend Jeff. This week's story comes from us from an anonymous post from August of 2012. It's no secret that for hundreds of years, Native Americans have had interactions with Sasquatch. They're very familiar with the hairy giant that lives in the wilderness. Throughout Native America and North America, Bigfoot is seen as kind of a brother to humans. In Indian culture, the entire natural world, the animals, the plants, the rivers, the stars, it's seen as a family, and Bigfoot is seen as a close relative, their great older brother. A poster from western Montana wrote an incredible account about various events that had happened while living on an Indian reservation. One event describes how a group of men became traumatized after killing a Bigfoot and burying its body. This is that story. So I want to be up front. I live in western Montana. The mountains are real, the wilderness is real, and so are the people. I live on a reservation, and the population of Native American to white and other is about 50-50. My father's a tribal member, and my mother is not. I am therefore a white descendant and have grown up experiencing both sides of the culture. I've spent time in the rough neighborhoods and at the white-owned ranches and farms. Both whites and Indians have stories that they tell, and they rarely tell them because they're so paranormal in nature. Let me tell you about something that people don't talk about here. When my father was born, he was conscious. This is something he would never tell a stranger, but I'm telling you what he told me. He remembers being in a waiting room before birth and surrounded by thousands of babies. Some were deformed, some were sickly, some were black and Asian, and other races. And one of them was covered in hair. It's impossible for me to explain this part better than he could, but basically, he saw the waiting room for souls coming into this particular area of the world, and he was one of the few that were let through. I'm only sharing this detail because as a child, I had dreams about the hairy man and his family before I was ever exposed to the concept of Bigfoot. These dreams were frightening and unexplainable, and only made sense years later when my father finally related this to me. In my opinion, the hairy man is somehow related to this area in a big way in my ancestors. Having been the first to settle this area, I've had extensive experiences with the hairy men that have been buried under generations of secrecy and tight lips. Sasquatch may be part of my genetic memory as well as my father's and our grandfather's. Years later, as a small boy, he was playing in the living room when he and his many brothers, when one of them burst through the door screaming and crying for my grandmother to come out and make him go away. This was the first time the hairy man had reappeared in my father's life. My uncle, also a child at the time, had seen a Sasquatch in the small garden out back, which is tucked next to a small creek. At the time, it was surrounded by trees. The Sasquatch was stealing vegetables, and he ran off after being sighted. Nobody spoke of this event afterwards. Sasquatch was taken for granted back then anyway, and my grandmother, raising a house full of young boys by herself, had no desire to encourage them to panic, which they were. As the years went by, my father reached his early 20s, and stories had been popping up around the reservation about a wild man breaking into houses and scaring children at night. Indian Town, it was called, and the downtown area with government housing, etc., is a rough neighborhood that I grew up in myself as a kid. Indian Town was a very tight-lipped place, and people didn't speak about these events to anyone but close relatives. The historic church which Indian Town centers around has had many controversies and disturbing stories. At night in Indian Town, someone very large and smelly had been rummaging through garbage and trashing yards. A couple of houses had been broken into and completely trashed. Food from the cupboards was taken, food that a bear or other wild animal wouldn't have been able to access. People couldn't deduce whether it was a wild animal, an alcoholic or drug addict, or just kids causing trouble. This carried on for some years when one family in particular started to be visited by hairy men almost every night. They would come home and see the door was left open, their food taken, and the animals were cowering under the tables, and the routine was so familiar that they treated it as common occurrence. Like the family ghost, as my father put it, something that's out there that the family just is afraid to acknowledge. They kept their lips tight, but word got around. People were getting nervous. Everyone started to lock their doors at night. And this was unheard of during the 70s. Dogs were acting cowardly for no apparent reason. The wild man was having free rein. He was getting bold. He started to break into houses during the middle of the day. Children would see him and flip out. Police were called. Meetings were held. The town was becoming more and more shaken up by the presence of this unknown intruder. This is when something incredible happened to the one particular family who was frequented by the hairy man. They had become so lax and accepting of the hairy man's presence that one night, while standing on the porch, the father was yanked off clear off of his feet in full view of the entire family. They screamed and huddled together and cried while whatever it was fought with him. Dad was pulled off the porch. The sounds of fighting and screaming, with knowing that your father was powerless against whatever it was, it must have been unspeakably traumatic for the kids. They're now grown up like myself, and I wonder to this day how much this affected their lives. The father was gone for days. Whatever it had taken him was carried him off into the night, and after a struggle on the porch. There was blood on the grass, and the family grabbed neighbors and some men from the community to help recover the father. The men got together and followed the signs of the trails left by whatever it was, drops of blood and signs of something large passing through. They followed this trail all the way to the very creek that my uncle had spotted the Sasquatch at. They followed the creek all night long. When the men returned the next day, they didn't speak a word. The whole group of grown men, not one of them was willing to speak about what happened. They had, however, found the father. They recovered him. He was beaten black and blue all over his entire body, ribs broken, arms and legs broken. The father was in shock, incoherent, and couldn't speak a word. One of my uncles had gone to see the man and his family in the hospital. There was a fair amount of goodwill being shown to the family that they went through this experience. Nobody knew exactly what happened, only the father was close to death and the family was very shaken up. So my uncle stopped by to pay his respects and saw for himself the father laying in the hospital. His eyes were bulging wide. He was trembling constantly. This man had been beaten badly. Something else was wrong with him. He was traumatized. He died that night, and to this day, nobody really knows what grabbed him or what really happened in the woods that night. Even now, the men who went on this recovery mission to save him have kept the stories to themselves. Only a select circle, including my father, remembers these incidents. Almost nobody talks about them. I've shared them with you for whatever it's worth. Those men found what took the father that night. They found the hairy man, and they killed it. They shot it to death with high-powered rifles, and they buried the body. The men who did this feel incredibly guilty. Sasquatch is a matter of fact here. The older generations told us to avoid them and leave them alone. They can most certainly be monsters, and this is one story that corroborates that. Back in the 1970s, there was no desire to be rich and famous for killing a Bigfoot. There were no desires to even talk about Bigfoot. These kind of things were dirty little secrets, especially on reservations. Yes, there were plenty of white kids bumping into Bigfoot and getting in the newspaper, but the Indian community is tight-lipped about this, even still to this day. Hairy Man was a dirty little secret, and I'm glad my dad told me this story. To this day, Bigfoot is still sighted in these surrounding mountain ranges, over a dozen times. One of the latest sightings was less than a quarter mile behind my house. At a nearby man-made lake, a Sasquatch was sighted by a retired elementary school principal, who I knew personally. He related to my grandmother in private, and that's the only reason that I know. I hope this was worth the read. Anonymous. Well, folks, there you have it. Yet another incredible real Bigfoot encounter. Being half Native American myself, I grew up with stories of the hairy man that would carry you off if you wandered too far from the camp in the dark. Not all encounters are rainbows and pixie dust. Until next time, I'm Reverend Jeff, and may the Squatch be with you.